Was the trip worth it? What were the meetings like? Those are some of the questions people are asking. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe caught up with him in the lobby of the Mayflower Hotel here in Washington, D.C., and was able to put some questions to him about the meetings. So overall, your feeling on the meetings, how did it go? Was the trip worth it on the grand scale, first off?
I think very much so. Saskatchewan is a province that has been spending time in Washington for over 15 years now. I've been down here 2 to 3 times a year for the last 6-7 years. And certainly, this mission with all of the premiers here is the first time I've seen that. We've seen 5 premiers, I think was the largest amount a few years ago at the conclusion of USMCA. So I think largely when you look, more globally at the mission on behalf of Canadians collectively, very much the engagement with policymakers here in the U.S. was very, very helpful for the discussion that's going to go on for a number of weeks and maybe a few months now.
Before we get to the meeting at the White House, there were obviously every premier having their own individual meetings targeting people who are, have an interest in something that's big in their home economy, their area of interest. What was that for you? Who were you meeting with?
Well, herein lies the diversity of how our diversity in Canada is really our strength. We come at these meetings with a very different background with respect to the industries that we're engaging on and the individual states and representative and policymakers that we may want to engage on. So a number of premiers were down early, some are maybe staying a day later to engage in areas that are specifically interest their province, and then we had the one day to engage collectively as Canadian premiers with a number of folks as well. For instance, something that's very high in the priority of Saskatchewan's economic growth and our opportunity is, mining, energy, and agriculture. So we engaged with a number of folks throughout the Midwest that are very much accessing Saskatchewan potash to grow their crops, and the ag producers throughout the Corn Belt. Chuck Grassley was an individual that we had a very good sit down and came to many points of agreement, and we'll find our way through this discussion over the next while.
He's a pretty big Republican, Grassley.
Grassley is very much a large Republican, representing Iowa and a strong voice. I think he's the longest-serving senator or longest-serving elected representative in the place, and just a great guy to meet with and a great representative of his district and his state and the U.S. The Energy Committee, we had met with a number of folks on the Energy Committee, Bob Latta, as well as a number of other folks to really discuss how we need to work together to ensure that we're creating this North American energy secure continent, that continental energy security that we desire, and how the talk of tariffs and barriers at the 49th peril are barriers to the industry in general, and the production of that energy really aren't beneficial for us achieving that continental energy security. So a number of meetings in that space. In that space, we additionally had met with Secretary Burgum, Secretary Wright, Secretary of Energy and Interior, and had a great conversation about what the future looks like for energy production, not only in the United States, but how we are working together with Canadian energy, largely from Western Canada, but not all, Canadian energy, to achieve that energy dominance that the U.S. is discussing, and that is their target, and how Canada in the long term, and largely Saskatchewan and Alberta, again, our diversity is our strength, can be a part of that conversation.
The White House meeting came about in an interesting way. I wouldn't have expected the power player to be the premier of one of the territories, but Raj Pillay met Don Jr. at a hunting show, and that led to connections, which led to connections. It's a funny world down here, isn't it?
Yeah, and collectively, I think that's the value of all 13 premiers engaging in a mission like this. Is collectively we represent all Canadians, but also between the 13 of us, we have a number of various contacts through our maybe time in public life or through our time prior to public life as well, and that certainly was the case with Premier Pillay from the Yukon, but also many other premiers as well. And so we're fortunate to have a meeting with some administration in the White House, some of President Trump's administration, and it was a good meeting, and I would say a very positive meeting that at this point of the conversation is helping provide some clarity on maybe what we need to do in the way of decisions in the short term, and then what we need to delay as decisions for a time that might be a week or two or three later.
What is the back and forth in this? Because I'm guessing that you're making the case for Canada, but they're also explaining, okay, well, this is why we're doing it, or this is where we have irritants.
Yeah, no, there is that, and it's coming to an understanding of what are the priorities of President Trump, what are the priorities of the Senate and the House leaders that are there, but also understanding and displaying what are the priorities of in my case Saskatchewan, but also collectively, what are the priorities of Canadians in this, what I call the greatest economic relationship in the world, the ability for us to create value for one another's products north and south of the border, whether it's an automobile, a jet, or whether it's keeping our lights on and powering our future in industries that are creating wealth for North American families. So it's collectively the strength of our contacts, the collective strength of and diversity of what we do across Canada can really come together, and I think Canada was really represented quite well here this past few days.
My understanding is that at your meeting, but also Minister LeBlanc's meeting with officials, that there was a similar message at the end. We don't have all the players in place yet. Come back after confirmation. So are you going to come back as a group or individually, or what's?
Yeah, I think there's some premiers likely to be back next week. I'll be back in 2 weeks. I'm off to Mexico for a few days as well, as Mexico certainly is a market of importance and a value trading partner for Saskatchewan. So we're off to Mexico for a couple of days. We'll be back home for a week, and then we'll be back in Washington, D.C. in about 2 weeks, doing exactly that. There are some secretaries that have been affirmed and are in working place, as I said, Secretary Burgum, Secretary Wright, but the one significant one for us to negotiate, any updates or really after 5 years, a review of our USMCA document has not been affirmed yet, and that's would be Secretary Lutnick, and that thankful that Minister LeBlanc is down here representing Canada in any of those discussions, and I'm certain that will continue. So we do have to wait for a few confirmations. There's no tariffs that have been applied to either Canada or the U.S. today, and so I think as Canadians and as subnational leaders and national leaders in Canada, we just need to remember to make the decisions that we might be required to make as we're required to make them, and don't get ahead of ourselves.
One of the things that people need to remember about a place like Washington, D.C. is the one-on-one interactions, putting a face to a name, shaking the hand. That matters greatly. It's very important in all business, but it seems much more important here than back home in Canada. So on that instance, you would have to say that coming down to Washington was very much worth it. They did get meetings with administration officials. They did get meetings with top senators and people in the House of Representatives. Now they've just got to apply the tactics of relationship, of salesmanship, of diplomacy to getting a good outcome for Canada. Let me know what you think. Drop a comment down below. Share this on social media. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.